you're watching Gearz, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. Today we are rolling the 40 Chevy hot rod back into the shop to deal with all of the fitment issues that happen anytime that you pull a body off of a frame and build something from the ground up. Now, if you're not familiar with this project, here's a quick overview of what it is and what we've done so far. Inspired by the hot rod craze of the early 1970s that was brought on by the American Graffiti Deuce Coupe and the California Kid 34-3 window, the car is a 1940 Chevy Coupe that's been bouncing around from owner to owner for decades as an unfinished project. So we decided to build it into a classic hot rod to pay tribute to this amazing aftermarket that makes all this possible. Now, like most old project cars, it came with a pile of parts thrown inside. But time had not been kind to those parts. So instead of messing with old obsolete parts and an old rusty frame, we got a brand new replacement frame from Fitment Fabrications that's not only 3 times stronger, but it's also loaded with modern independent front suspension, disc brakes, and rack and pinion steering. In the rear, we kept the hot rod vibe going with a winner's quick change rear end. Then we capped it with matching Willwood disc brakes and added a triangulated 4-link, sway bar, and coilovers to hold it all in place. For power, we started with a 500 horsepower small block Chevy from Blueprint Engines and bolted on a Holley tri-power and classic Edelbrock valve covers to give it the right look and the attitude that we were after. Then we backed it all up with the Tremec TKX 5-speed because real hot rods have got to have a stick.
Always a stick.
Stick!
A stick in a hot rod. Has to.
All right, with all the major components laid out, you would think that it's time to take that body and put it down on this frame and be gone, right? Yeah, I wish it was that easy. Now, there is a lot more involved in a level 4 frame-off build than there is on something like a level 1 or level 2. That sort of project is more of a restoration style project where you're taking off parts and replacing them with something similar. This is a completely different animal because you're creating something that's coming out of your own head that never really existed. So you have to think like an engineer, you have to think like a designer, you have to think like a mechanic, and of course you have to think like an enthusiast. Because the goal here is to not just have something that's fast and loud and fun, but it also needs to all work together, it needs to be safe, and it needs to be serviceable. And that takes planning. So that's what we're going to show you how to do today. Now, as you can see, the motor mounts and the transmission crossmember holes have all been carefully drilled and everything is sitting in here perfectly. But you got to be thinking beyond that because the very way you put the bolts in could have huge repercussions once you get the body on here or an exhaust in or other accessories. Let me show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, this motor mount bolt was put in before this fuel pump was put on, but you can still get the bolt out. However, if that bolt was going the other direction, it would be trapped by the fuel pump, requiring the removal of the fuel pump to get it out. That's what we call building yourself into a corner, and that's the kind of stuff you want to avoid. Okay, when it comes to the transmission, obviously the Tremecs are a great choice if you gotta have a stick. And American Powertrain's got everything that you're gonna need to bolt it to the engine of your choice and go. But it's up to you to make the transmission fit the rest of the vehicle. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When you start laying out your floor, you can see that this big old TKX takes up a lot of room. You're gonna have to modify the floor and build a hump to fit the transmission. Also, when you're laying out the floor, you need to factor in how you're going to get access to your master cylinders. There's a company named Tanks, and they build these great stainless steel little hatches. It gives you perfect access to things like that. Now, one other thing that you want to deal with while you have everything stripped down is the drive shaft, because it is so easy to measure everything out with the body off. Now, I know you're going to be tempted to go down to a junkyard, pick up an old drive shaft, and have somebody modify it locally, because that's the way you used to have to do it. But that never turns out very well. And there's no reason to do it that way now that there's companies like Denny's drive shafts out there. Now, Denny's specializes in building custom drive shafts for however you're going to drive the vehicle, whatever horsepower, whatever you're going to do. And he guarantees them not to break. Now, I've been trying to break a Denny's drive shaft for decades now. I've never done it, but I'm going to keep trying.
In a world of economic uncertainty, there will always be a need for quality tools and people who can use them. That's why becoming a Cornwell tool dealer is one of the best career moves you can make. With routes available all across the nation, it's a great way to be your own boss. Supply high-quality tools to professionals and make some real money. If you're tired of working for someone else, have the drive to succeed, and want a career that can be successful no matter what happens on Wall Street, there's a Cornwell tool truck with your name on the side.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz on our 40 Chevy Hot Rod project, where we're going through some of the things that you're going to run into when you take the leap and jump into a full frame-off build, because the mentality is different than a restoration-style project. Now, at this point, we're working our way forward, and we're to headers and exhaust. And this is where things can get really crazy, because the first thing you need to decide is how the exhaust is going to fit into the frame or the chassis. I mean, is it going to go underneath? If that's the case, you need to leave enough clearance if you're building a really low vehicle. Are you going to run the exhaust through the frame? If so, there's frame rails, cross members, transmissions, and master cylinders to consider. Are you going to take it over the frame? Well, there's inner fenders to deal with, and then you got to decide what happens to the pipe after that. Also, are you going to be running exhaust cutouts, side pipes, straight pipes? I mean, where's your mufflers going to go? As you can see, there is a lot to consider here. Now, once you get a basic idea of how the exhaust is going to lay out, you can move on to that first component, and that's the headers. Now, this should be simple, right? Order something online or find something at a swap meet. Well, if you're working on something stock like that, yeah, you can do that. But on a resto mod or a hot rod where you've changed everything, you can't just buy parts for this. Finding headers that are going to do what you want can be a bit of a challenge. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I've got 4 of the most popular styles of hooker headers laid out on the floor here, and only one is a direct bolt-on for this style project. So let's start with the most common, the classic long tube header like you'd find on most full-size cars and trucks. The driver's side header bolts up and clears the frame, but underneath, the collector hits the frame and points right at the master cylinder. The passenger side won't even bolt up due to contact with the collector under the frame. And these headers position the pipe under the frame, and we want to run the exhaust through the frame. So these are out. Next up is the mid-length header like you'd see on a Camaro or a Corvette. Now these are a bit shorter and for tighter situations. And the passenger side bolts right on and definitely puts the collector in a better place if you're running exhaust under the car. But the driver's side header hits the frame in several places. So these are out. Number 3 is the header side pipe combination that you see on everything from vans to Corvettes to El Caminos. And surely something like this is going to fit because they flow down under the frame and then down the sides of the car. Unfortunately, we've got fitment issues here as well, because most of these are made for wider vehicles, and they would take a ton of work to fit to these tapered frames and older bodies. So, these are out. The 4th choice is called the block hugger header, and it was designed to fit tight frames like this and still give you the high flow of a header. And unlike everything else so far, they actually bolt to both sides of the engine without hitting anything. Notice how they fit nice and tight against the block and keep the collector high. This will allow you to run cutouts down in this area, run the exhaust under the frame, run it through the frame. You've got all kinds of options here. Now, of course, they may not look as impressive or flow quite as well as a long tube header, but if you're building something strange like this, that is the best option because they'll fit just about anything.
If you like cars, if you like coffee, you're gonna love Gearz coffee cars. Because in each pack, you'll find a special blend of rich, robust coffee to get your blood pumping, as well as a collectible cartoon sticker and matching photo card of some of the wildest vehicles Stacey has built or featured over the years. Collect the whole series and be sure to keep an eye out for the ultra-rare Strange Brew card that are added to random packages to keep things interesting. It's Gearz coffee cars, the best bean on the car scene.
Hey, we're back and finishing up some of the final details on our new frame and drivetrain for our 40 Chevy. So we can take that body and put it down on this frame and make them start to work together. Now at this point, we're ready to start putting accessories on the front of this engine. And the goal here is to get something that's going to work with the look of this classic hot rod engine. It's going to give us all the accessories that we need, and it's also going to be tight enough to fit this very restrictive engine bay. Here's what we're using. This is the Holley mid-mount accessory system. And the key component is this huge water pump manifold that bolts in the stock location. The weird shape uses the same concept as the LS engine to mount all the accessories to this main manifold. Check it out. The high output alternator mounts in the upper corner. Then the power steering pump tucks underneath it. The air conditioning compressor goes in the opposite upper corner. And a serpentine belt and spring tensioner connects them all together and makes it work. Now this not only looks good, but it also puts all of the accessories low and tight on the front of the engine, which is really important on these early vehicles where space is limited by the radiator. All right, now so far you've seen pretty much the fun part of doing a frame-off build. We're using all new components, everything's nice and clean, easy to get to, that's great. But it's not all like that. No, keep in mind there's an old car involved here, and eventually you're going to have to connect these two together and make one vehicle. And that time on this project is now. So we're going to do some detail painting on some of the parts we put on the chassis, and we're also going to unbolt this body, get things disconnected, and get ready to pull it up off here. First, we'll remove any access panels or brackets. The old wiring is next, and since none of this is going to be reused, just cut it and remove it. Since the old steering column and steering box are not going to be reused either, we're just going to cut those off down by the box. Now this is not only going to save us the hassle of fighting with the old rusty bolts, but it's also going to make removing the steering column much, much easier. The body bolts are where things get challenging on an old vehicle. Sometimes they show mercy and come out without breaking. I believe this one's going to come out. Oh, look at that. That's amazing that that didn't break. Other times they mock you and will snap off right at the body, leaving the broken bolt up inside. That, of course, needs to be removed and fixed down the line. Let me out of here. Okay, With everything unbolted or removed that could possibly hold that body down on the frame, now you're ready to try to lift that thing off. Now, there's several ways to do this. You can use a hoist, you can use a lift, you can use a crane. Heck, 3 or 4 of your buddies can supply the power to lift the body off. All right, I want you to set it straight down. Now, sometimes you can put a lift under the rockers or the body and lift from the bottom. But remember, rockers are generally not designed to support the weight of a body. And if they're weak or rusty, you could destroy them. So you're better off going underneath a cross member under the floor. Another option is to lift from the top, running straps or planks through the windows or door openings. And that'll work fine as long as the top is solid and you're careful not to damage the window and door openings. A third option is to utilize factory mounting holes for fenders or body panels, bolt some brackets on, and go from there. Obviously, that's what we're going to do on this body because those are usually threaded and reinforced from the factory, so they're plenty strong. But no matter which way you go to do it, the goal here is to lift the body off and not do any damage to it. The first step is to position an H-frame over the body. Then we'll connect lifting straps to the 4 corners and level them up. All right, with the body lift frame in place over the top of the car and the straps solidly connected and adjusted on all 4 corners, we'll use the hoist to pick the body up off the frame.
A successful automotive project takes planning and organization, but instead of using an old tablet or notebook, there's the Gearz Deluxe Project Planning Book. This was designed to help you lay out a project, the parts, the tools, costs, and keep it organized with colored tabs, a pouch for receipts, and even a place to attach photos. If you decide to sell the vehicle, it serves as a complete history of what's been done. If you have a project or plan on starting one, the Gearz Project Planning Book is the best way to lay it out and make it happen. Can't get enough Gearz? Make sure to check out the Tales of a Gearhead podcast, where Stacey brings a lifetime of automotive knowledge, friendships, and expertise to the listener. Also, check out our social media channels for updates and videos of Gearz projects, as well as special contests, giveaways, and events. If you have a vehicle you want to enter into What Are You Working On?, go to staceydavid.com and submit it. There's also the online store and tons of other Gearhead information that will encourage you to get out there, build something, and go drive it.
Hey, welcome back to the Hot Rod Kid 40 Chevy Coupe project. Now, if this is your first time seeing a body up off a frame, you're probably thinking, man, this is awesome. I have got to do a project like this. And that's great. We want you to do a project like this. But what you see here is the main reason that I recommend people do not jump into a level 4 frame-off style build if you don't have at least 3 bays of space to work in. Because obviously you need a space for the body, you need a space for the frames, and then you need a space to work in. Now you might be thinking, I don't need that much room, and you might not. But keep in mind, you're going to be putting that body down on this frame multiple times throughout this build. And if you don't have the tools and the space to do that, that's going to be a problem. Okay, with the body up off the frame for the first time, we can finally get a good look at the bottom. And sure enough, there's evidence of old repair work and rusty inner rockers and all kinds of stuff. So that will all need to go on the list of things that we need to replace. All right, with the frame and drivetrain all laid out, it's time to set the body in place for the first time. Okay, we know that the factory mounting holes on the body are going to line up perfectly with the mounting holes on the new Fatman frame. What we're looking for, though, is clearance issues with the firewall, with the transmission tunnel and the floor, and back at the rear end. Now, as you can see, we have some clearance issues, especially back here in the rear. Now, I know some of you are thinking, what? You got this fancy frame here. I thought it would just bolt up perfectly. That, my friends, would not be reality. This is reality. Now, it will bolt down and fit perfectly once you take care of all of the clearance issues that happen because of the rear end you chose, the transmission that you put in, and the engine that you had to have. And we're going to show you how to get everything fitting just right, but not today because we're out of time.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Anthony, and he is in Illinois. And his project is very unique. It is a 1952 Munce Jet. Now look at this thing. Very rare car. They only made about 400 of these things from 51 to 54. Now he said his dad picked this up about 1978. Anthony was only 5 years old, and it was supposed to be a car for his older brother who was 15. He said, unfortunately, the Munce only drove one time with this 331 Hemi, and it had no brakes, and it turned out to be too much of a project for the young boys. So it sat, and they worked on Volkswagens and hot rods over the years. And he says, sadly, his older brother passed away about 8 years ago, and his father came to him and he says, hey, get your other brothers and finish that Munce, would you please? And so they started working on it. Now, here's what they've done so far. Check this out. They replaced all of the rusty metal, pretty much from the middle of the doors down. The original 331 Hemi was cracked, so they stuck in a 392. All the chrome was sent out and was redone. The glass was redone. The interior is being redone exactly like it was original. And of course, the paint and bodywork, they're all doing themselves. Now, he says it won't be long until the Munce is back at the house and they go through the final assembly and the wiring. And he says, any of you guys that want to drop by and help him out, you're welcome to. Well, man, I'll tell you what, this is the first Munce that we've had. That is a very cool car, and I can't wait to see it done. Anything with a Hemi in it is awesome. So to recognize such a unique project, Anthony, we're going to give you one of these bead rollers from Woodward Fab. As you can see, this is a manual bead roller. Comes with a bunch of dies, so you'll be able to shape some metal with this thing. Then we're also going to give you a fender cover. That way you can protect the paint on that car when it's done. And then we're going to give you one of these deluxe project planning books. This will allow you to keep track of everything that you've done to that car. And then finally, we're going to give you one of these Sergeant Rock die casts because those are just cool. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this and get your projects featured on the show, you got to send them to us. Go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On? The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation. Also, make sure you check out our social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all at Official Stacey David. YouTube is also the place to view all of your favorite Gearz episodes, as well as the Gearz Restoration Series and our full project builds that follow a project from beginning to end. And finally, if you're a radio person, be sure and check out our podcast, Tales of a Gearhead. All right, that wraps it up for us today. Hopefully you feel inspired to get out there and work on a project of your own. It does not have to be a big frame off like we're doing or something strange like Anthony's working on. Just something that you like and you want to turn your own wrenches on. So get out there, start working on something. We'll see you next time.